around the world to discuss technical issues and set peer safety standards. If you look at a nuclear power plant, there is incredible defense in depth. Okay? There is a series of redundancies, starting with a containment facility, starting with backup emergency systems. There's a lot of safety put in there. Does this safety work? Well, there are fewer deaths attributed to nuclear power than any other energy source. Okay? There has been no Canadian deaths at a reactor since its fire in 1957 at Chalk River. So in the last 50 plus years, 0 deaths. Okay? Compare that to a coal mine. Compare that to a sour gas well. Compare that to the oil rigs off the coast of Newfoundland. And in fact, I'd go further. What other sector can claim that sort of safety record? Construction industry? The agricultural industry? There have been more deaths due to lunch meat than there have been to nuclear power in this country. Let's look at public opinion polls, because these actually help in a weird sort of way to deal with this nuclear safety issue. There's been consistent time sequence polling data in this country for decades. And where are the 3 most popular regions for nuclear power according to the public in this country? Bruce County, Ontario, where there are nuclear power plants. St. John, New Brunswick, where the Point Lacroix reactor is. Durham region, where the Pickering nuclear plant is. Now, some of that opinion could be due to the fact that there's a lot of workers there. There's families of workers there. There's neighbors of workers there. And that's probably the case in St. John, and it's definitely the case in Bruce County. But it's not the case in Durham region, where there are several 100,000 people that live there, and they can't all be working at the time. But what they have been doing is driving down the 401 highway day after day after day for the last 20 plus years. And the reactor's still there. You don't have body bags in the streets. It hasn't blown up. There aren't fires there. And so it becomes common. It becomes normal. Let's go further on this safety issue. If you accept the fact that nuclear power is dangerous, then obviously the people who live closest to a reactor, those that work in a reactor, would be the most vulnerable. Well, let's go back to those nuclear engineers and nuclear physicists who know an awful lot more about nuclear fission than either myself or Dr. Policott do, and yet they work there, and they raise their kids there. Okay? So you hear horror stories about Chalk River. There's a lot of Atomic Energy of Canada Limited employees that live in Chalk River. They raise their kids in Chalk River. If they felt that it was dangerous, okay, would they still be living there? Would they put their family through that? In the case of Peace River, if Bruce Power was deciding to move forward on their project and submit a license to the Canadian Nuclear Safety Commission, it would require an environmental assessment process. This would take about 3 years. It would be a coordination between the Canadian Nuclear Safety Commission and the Department of Environment in Alberta. There would be opportunities for public hearings, for public submissions. There would be interveners that would gather. It is a long and arduous process to ensure that the reactor is safe. I mentioned when I talked about safety, 3 Mile Island and Pickering, the 2 most famous, prominent nuclear accidents. Let's look at 3 Mile Island. 1979, Pennsylvania, meltdown. Evacuation of the region. Nobody died. The second worst nuclear accident, nuclear power accident in history, and nobody died. Chernobyl, the #1 accident. And estimates are around 40 to 45 people immediately died. Increased cancer rates have existed in the Ukraine. It's extended to Belarus. But why did this happen? A very bad reactor design that's not going to be built in Canada, would never have been licensed in Canada or in any other Western country. It didn't even have a containment structure. The containment structure is that large dome. That's the core. They turned off the safety devices to run a test. There was delayed response by emergency workers. And I think we could say a lot about lax standards in a Soviet communist political culture. Again, much different from a democratic country like Canada. And so even though Chernobyl is the worst disaster ever, it's a disaster that did not happen in this country. And we need to focus on that. Nuclear waste is the Achilles heel of the nuclear industry. I think we can all agree on that part. And there's a lot of concern about waste. But all energy has waste. So what can we say that's different about nuclear as opposed to coal, natural gas, or oil? Well, first, it's a very, very small amount of waste that is produced. If you were to gather all of the waste ever produced in Canada, and we've been running reactors since the 40s, the second reactor in the world came in Canada, it would take up about 6 hockey rinks. Less than the daily dosage of garbage in a major city like Edmonton. Peace River's got less garbage. The second thing is we can count the waste. It's stored on site at this moment, as opposed to just emitting it into the atmosphere. If there was a coal industry rep here and you were to ask him how much waste has been emitted, they wouldn't have a clue. Or the oil industry from flaring, or sour gas. You can count it. I don't have the exact number in front of me, but you can get it. There is the Nuclear Waste Management Organization, a non-profit group commissioned by Parliament, by the Canadian Parliament, to develop a long-term storage plan. And they have that long-term storage plan. Basically going from reactor to one set of containers to another set of containers on site to a permanent facility buried into the ground. Where they are right now is doing a site selection process. Now, if the technology exists, why can't they do it today? The Nuclear Waste Management Organization actually has an 8 to 10-year plan to find a site. Why? Because of public consultation, because of hearings, because of intervener statuses coming through. It's a very comprehensive grouping. There's another possibility that's coming on stream, and that's the ability of fuel recycling. Because a lot of what we call waste, or what the industry calls spent fuel, still retains massive amounts of energy. About 99% of that spent fuel still has uranium energy in it. What recycling involves is bringing it back through the system again and again and again. Now, from a cost perspective,